Commander Vexistar sat in his command chair, staring at the holographic display that showed thousands of star systems under hegemony control. His 6 arms moved across the control panels with mechanical precision, checking reports from across the galaxy. This was just another day in his 500-year career of conquest and expansion. The bridge of his massive warship hummed with quiet efficiency. Officers from dozens of different alien species worked at their stations, all serving the mighty hegemony of Velnok. They had done this same routine 12,000 times before. Find a new world, send the message, wait for surrender, collect tribute. It was so predictable that Vextar could practically do it in his sleep. His scanner operator, a 4-eyed creature from the Zentari system, looked up from his console. "Commander, we have located another primitive civilization. Single planet. 3rd orbit from their star, they call it Earth." Vextar barely glanced at the data streaming across his screen. Water world, oxygen atmosphere, single species in control. Their technology levels were laughably low compared to the hegemony's. Advanced systems, no space fleet, no planetary shields, no antimatter weapons. Just another easy conquest to add to their ever-growing empire. "Initiate standard protocol," Vextar commanded, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "Send the ultimatum." The communications officer, a tall being with crystalline skin who had served on this ship for over 2 centuries, began transmitting the message that had been sent to countless worlds before. The words were always the same, translated into whatever primitive language the target species used. "Greetings, inhabitants of Earth. You have been selected for integration into the hegemony of Velnok. Submit to our authority immediately, or face complete annihilation. You have exactly 1 solar rotation of your planet to comply with this demand. Resistance is futile. Surrender is your only option for survival." The message shot through space at faster-than-light speed, carrying with it the weight of 12,000 conquered worlds. Every species that had ever received this ultimatum had responded the same way. First came panic, then desperate attempts at negotiation, finally tearful surrender when they realized the hopelessness of their situation. Vextar settled back in his chair, already mentally composing his report to High Command. Another world, conquered without firing a single shot. Another species added to the tribute rolls, another step toward the hegemony's goal of controlling the entire galaxy. His tactical advisor, an insect-like creature with compound eyes, scuttled over to his chair. "Sir, based on their technology levels, I estimate they will surrender within 6 hours. Shall I prepare the occupation forces?" "Make it so," Vextar replied, not even bothering to look at the advisor. "Standard garrison deployment, nothing special. Required for such a primitive world." 24 hours passed. Vextar had actually forgotten about the Earth conquest, focusing instead on supply reports from recently conquered systems. The tribute collections were going well, and several rebellious worlds had been properly disciplined. It was shaping up to be a profitable quarter for the hegemony. The communications officer suddenly straightened at his station, confusion written across his crystalline features. "Commander, we have received a response from the Earth humans." Vextar's mandibles clicked together in mild interest. Finally, the surrender message had arrived. "Display it on the main screen. Let's see how they beg for mercy." But what appeared on the screen was not what anyone expected. Instead of a weeping planetary leader pleading for his people's lives, there was simply a star chart showing coordinates in empty space. Below the coordinates were 4 words in simple text: "Come and take it." The bridge fell completely silent. Every officer stopped what they were doing and stared at the message in complete bewilderment. In over 1,000 years of hegemony expansion, nothing like this had ever happened before. Vextar's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation. He read the message 3 times, certain there must be some mistake. No primitive species had ever responded to the ultimatum with defiance. It simply did not happen. His communications officer spoke first, voice trembling with uncertainty. "Sir, perhaps their translation systems malfunctioned. Maybe they do not understand the gravity of our message." The tactical advisor scuttled forward, compound eyes reflecting the light from the display screens. "Or possibly they are suffering from some form of mass psychosis. Primitive species sometimes react irrationally when faced with superior technology. But Vextar was studying the message more carefully now, and something about it troubled him deeply. The coordinates were precise, calculated to several decimal places. The language was clear and grammatically correct. This was not the response of a confused or panicked civilization. He pulled up Earth's data files again, scanning through their technology assessments and cultural analyses. Single world, no space empire, primitive weapons technology. Yet their response suggested a level of confidence that made no sense given their obvious disadvantages. "Sir," the scanner operator called out, "I'm detecting no military build-up on their planet. No additional ships, no new defensive installations. They appear to be continuing their normal daily activities, as if nothing has happened." This was even more puzzling. Every other species had immediately begun preparing for war or desperately trying to negotiate. The humans seemed completely unconcerned about the most powerful military force in the galaxy threatening their extinction. Vextar stood up from his command chair, all 6 arms gesturing at the tactical display. "Ready the subjugation fleet immediately. These humans clearly do not understand what they are dealing with. We will teach them the price of defying the hegemony." But even as he gave the orders, something nagged at the back of his mind. In all his centuries of conquest, he had learned to trust his instincts about alien civilizations. And his instincts were telling him that something was very, very wrong about this situation. The humans had not panicked. They had not begged. They had not even asked questions about the hegemony's demands. Instead, they had issued what could only be described as a challenge. Fleet Commander Vextar led his armada through hyperspace with absolute confidence. 200 warships followed his flagship, their dark hulls bristling with weapons that had reduced entire planets to ash. This was the standard subjugation force, perfectly sized for conquering a single primitive world. He had used this exact formation 43 times before, and it had never failed. The journey to the coordinates provided by the humans took 6 standard hours. During the trip, Vextar reviewed tactical data from previous conquests, noting how quickly other species had crumbled when faced with such overwhelming force. The longest any civilization had lasted was 18 minutes, and that was only because their planetary shields had required extra time to break through. As they dropped out of hyperspace, the vast emptiness of space greeted them. Stars twinkled in the distance, but the coordinates showed nothing but vacuum. Vexitar's mandibles clicked in annoyance. This was exactly what he had expected from a species too primitive to understand real warfare. "Typical," he muttered to his bridge crew. "Another desperate gesture from a doomed civilization. They probably thought meeting us in empty space would somehow save their pathetic planet." His tactical officer, a seasoned warrior who had participated in hundreds of conquests, studied the scanner readouts. "Sir, I detect no ships, no stations, no defensive platforms. This appears to be completely empty space. Perhaps the humans made an error in their coordinates." Vextar was about to order a return to Earth when his sensor operator suddenly tensed at his station. The young officer's 4 eyes widened as data began flooding his screens. "Commander, I'm beginning to detect some unusual energy readings. Very faint, almost like background radiation, but the patterns are strange." "Elaborate," Vextar commanded, though he was already growing bored with this pointless exercise. "Sir, it's as if something is here, but our sensors can't quite lock onto it. The energy signatures keep shifting like they're being deliberately masked." Before Vextar could respond, reality itself seemed to ripple around his fleet. Space shimmered like water, and suddenly the empty void was no longer empty. Ship after ship began materializing out of nowhere, their hulls becoming solid as advanced cloaking systems deactivated. The human vessels were smaller than hegemony warships, sleeker in design, but there was something about them that immediately put Vexitar on edge. Their energy signatures were reading at levels that should have been impossible for such a primitive civilization. Weapons systems that registered as more advanced than anything in the hegemony database. But what truly shocked him was their positioning. The human ships had not just appeared randomly in space. They had materialized in perfect formation around his entire fleet, surrounding all 200 hegemony vessels, with mathematical precision. Every angle of attack was covered, every escape route blocked. How did they know exactly where we would arrive? Vexitar whispered, his confidence beginning to crack. His communications officer was frantically trying to establish contact with the rest of the fleet, but something was wrong with their systems. Sir, I'm detecting massive interference across all frequencies. Our long-range communications are being jammed. Vexitar's tactical training kicked in immediately. All ships, battle stations, raise shields, charge weapons, prepare for combat. The Tuusas bridge erupted into activity as his crew rushed to implement combat protocols that had been perfected over centuries of conquest. Warning lights flashed red, energy barriers crackled to life around his ships, and massive weapons systems began, powering up with the distinctive whine of charging antimatter cannons. But then something impossible happened. One by one, every system on every hegemony ship began shutting down, not from weapons fire, not from external damage, but as if the ships themselves were betraying their crews. Shield generators went offline, weapons refused to charge, and navigation systems started displaying random coordinates. Vexitar watched in growing horror as his fleet status displays turned from green to yellow to red. 200 of the most advanced warships in the galaxy were being systematically disabled by an enemy that had not fired a single shot. "What is happening?" he demanded, but his engineering officer could only shake his head in bewilderment. "Sir, it's like our own systems are working against us. Every time we try to bring a weapon online, the targeting computer shuts down. When we attempt to raise shields, the power grid reroutes energy to non-essential systems. It's as if something has completely taken control of our ships." A new voice suddenly cut through the chaos on the bridge, clear, calm, and speaking perfect hegemony standard language. "Commander Vexitar of the Hegemony Forces, this is Admiral Kim Dae-ho of Earth, Defense Command. I hope you are beginning to understand that your usual tactics will not work here." Vexitar's mandibles clicked rapidly as he tried to process what was happening. "How are you accessing our communications? Our systems are supposed to be completely secure." Admiral Kim's response came with what sounded almost like amusement. "Commander, your security protocols were designed centuries ago by species that we have been studying for decades. Every encryption method, every firewall, every defensive system your empire uses has been thoroughly analyzed and countered." The human continued speaking as Vexitar's fleet hung helplessly in space, their mighty warships reduced to floating scrap metal. "Your education begins now, Commander. Consider this your first lesson in why your expansion ends here. You have spent so long conquering primitive civilizations that you forgot what it means to face an enemy that actually prepared for your arrival." Vexitar stared at his tactical display, watching as ship after ship reported complete system failure. These were vessels that had bombarded planets into submission, that had broken through defensive lines that should have been impregnable. Now they floated powerless in space, completely at the mercy of a species he had dismissed as primitive. "This is impossible," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "We are the hegemony. We have conquered thousands of worlds. Our technology is superior to anything in this galaxy." Admiral Kim's voice returned, still calm but with an edge that sent chills through Vexitar's exoskeleton. "Yes, Commander, you have conquered thousands of worlds. And we watched every single one of those conquests. We studied your tactics, analyzed your technology, and learned from every mistake your victims made. While you were building an empire, we were building knowledge. And now it's time for you to learn what happens when humans decide to go to school." The transport beam deposited Commander Vexitar directly onto the bridge of his own flagship, but everything had changed. Where once his crew had operated with military precision, now human soldiers stood at every station. They wore simple grey uniforms without flashy decorations, and their weapons were compact devices that seemed almost toy-like compared to hegemony battle gear. What disturbed Vexitar most was how casually they treated him. No chains, no force, fields, no dramatic displays of power. They simply gestured for him to walk forward, as if he were a guest rather than a prisoner. This was not how conquering species typically behaved. At the center of the bridge stood two humans who were clearly in command. The first was Admiral Kim Dae-ho, a man who appeared to be in his 50s with graying hair and calm eyes that seemed to see everything. Beside him stood Captain Li Minji, a woman whose steady gaze and confident posture spoke of extensive combat experience. Both humans were noticeably smaller than Vextar's imposing 8-foot frame, and they looked almost fragile compared to his armored exoskeleton. Yet these seemingly delicate beings had just defeated the most powerful fleet in the galaxy without suffering a single casualty. How? The word escaped Vextar's mandibles before he could stop himself. It was the only question that mattered now. Captain, Li stepped forward and activated a holographic projector that filled the bridge with a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy. Thousands of star systems glowed in the display, each one marked with different colors and symbols. Red dots showed hegemony conquests, while blue lines traced their expansion routes over the past century. Your biggest mistake, Commander, was assuming that we would react like all the others, Li began, her voice carrying the tone of a teacher addressing a slow student. Let me show you exactly what we learned from your previous conquests. The hologram zoomed in on a star system marked with hegemony symbols. The Alterans were the first species you encountered in this sector. When your ultimatum arrived, they immediately called an emergency session of their planetary council. They spent precious hours debating whether to surrender or fight, and by the time they decided to resist, your fleet was already in orbit. Admiral Kim gestured, and the display showed tactical recordings of the Alteran defeat. They had decent ships and brave crews, but they tried to meet your fleet in open space combat. Classic mistake. Your vessels are designed for exactly that kind of engagement. The hologram shifted to another system. The Zerithians were different. They were natural warriors with a strong military tradition. They fought with incredible courage and determination, but they used conventional tactics that your empire had. Counted hundreds of times before. Same formations, same strategies, same predictable results. Captain Li continued the lesson as more conquered worlds appeared in the display. The Kellans tried stealth, hiding their main fleet behind their moon while sending decoy ships to distract you. The Viridians attempted diplomacy, offering tribute and alliance in exchange for independence. The Crystalline Collective tried to overwhelm you with sheer numbers. Each example showed the same pattern. Different species, different approaches, but identical outcomes. Vextar watched in growing amazement as the humans displayed detailed knowledge of battles he had fought decades ago. How do you know all this? He demanded. These communications were encrypted with quantum locks. Our battle records are classified at the highest levels. Admiral Kim smiled, but there was no warmth in the expression. Commander, we've been monitoring your empire's communications for over 40 years. Every message you've sent, every report you've filed, every tactical analysis your strategists have written, we've seen it all. The holographic display changed again, now showing a timeline of human technological development. While you were busy conquering worlds, we were busy learning. Every species you defeated taught us something valuable about what doesn't work against the hegemony. Captain Li highlighted specific examples. 37 different civilizations tried the exact same defensive formation when facing your standard attack pattern. They positioned their heavy ships in the center, with fighters providing cover. On the flanks, every single time you used the same counter-tactic, sending your fast attack ships to eliminate the fighters while your main guns focused on the heavy vessels. 14 separate species attempted identical diplomatic strategies, Kim added. They all offered the same types of tribute, made the same promises of cooperation, even used similar emotional appeals about their children and families. A response was always identical too. You listened politely, then destroyed their fleets anyway. Vextar felt his world crumbling as he realized the scope of human preparation. You studied our methods. We studied everything, Li corrected. Every battle plan, every weakness you exploited, every mistake your enemies made. But more importantly, we identified every pattern in your own behavior. After watching you conquer thousands of worlds, we knew exactly how you would attack us, the He. Hologram now showed Earth, surrounded by defensive installations that definitely had not existed when Vextar first received the planet's coordinates. You see, Commander, everyone else made the same fundamental error. They tried to fight the Hegemony using conventional military thinking. They assumed that having better ships or more soldiers would be enough. Admiral Kim gestured to recordings of human ships disabling the hegemony fleet. We took a different approach. Instead of trying to build bigger guns, we focused on understanding your technology better than you do. Instead of training more soldiers, we studied your tactical doctrine until we could predict your every move. Your empire became our greatest teacher, Lee continued. Every world you conquered showed us exactly what not to do when facing the hegemony. Every successful tactic you used taught us what we needed to counter. Every weakness you exploited in other species helped us identify and eliminate those same weaknesses in ourselves. Vextar looked around at his own bridge, now completely under human control. These small, seemingly fragile beings had achieved what no other species in Galactic history had managed. They had not just defeated the hegemony, they had made it look easy. You turned our own strength against us, he whispered. Captain Lee nodded, her expression growing more serious. Class is now in session, Commander, and you're about to learn why humans make very poor students, but exceptional teachers. The lesson we're about to give will be remembered across the galaxy for centuries to come. The news of Fleet Commander Vextar's defeat reached Hegemony High Command within hours, sending shockwaves through the Empire's leadership. For the first time in over 1,000 years, an entire hegemony fleet had been captured without destroying a single enemy vessel. The impossible had happened, and Supreme Commander Zalvek knew that the Empire's reputation was at stake. Zalvek was a veteran of 3 centuries of conquest, a massive being whose scarred exoskeleton told the story of countless battles. He had personally overseen the subjugation of over 200 worlds, and his tactical genius was legendary throughout the Empire. If anyone could crush these upstart humans, it would be him. Assemble the Grand Armada, he commanded from his throne aboard the Empire's largest dreadnought. Every available ship, every weapon system, every piece of technology from every conquered world. These humans want to play games with the hegemony. We will show them what real power looks like. The mobilization took 3 standard days. Ships arrived from across the galaxy, representing the combined military might of 12,000 conquered worlds. Massive dreadnoughts that could crack planets, swarms of fighter craft that had darkened the skies of countless systems, and super weapons that had been built using technology stolen from dozens of different civilizations. The Grand Armada was truly a sight to behold. 10,000 ships arranged in perfect formation, stretching across multiple star systems. No force in galactic history had ever assembled such overwhelming firepower in one place. The sheer mass of the fleet created gravitational distortions that bent light around the edges of their formation. Back on Earth, Admiral Kim Dae-ho stood in the orbital command center alongside Fleet Admiral Park Soo-jin, watching as long-range sensors detected the approaching armada. The scale of the enemy force was staggering, representing more military power than most civilizations had ever seen. Well, that's certainly impressive, Park commented, studying the tactical display that showed the massive wall of ships moving toward their position. They really don't understand the concept of subtlety, do they? Kim nodded, his expression remaining calm despite the overwhelming odds they faced. They're used to solving every problem with bigger guns and more ships. It's worked for them for centuries, so they see no reason to change their approach. That's going to be another valuable lesson they learn today. The Grand Armada dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Earth's solar system, their formation so vast that it blocked out entire sections of stars. Supreme Commander Zalvek had arranged his forces in the classic hegemony attack pattern that had proven successful against every enemy they had ever faced. Heavy dreadnoughts formed the center of the formation, their massive guns capable of destroying cities with single shots. Fast attack cruisers protected the flanks, ready to exploit any weakness in enemy defenses. Clouds of fighter craft swarmed around the larger vessels like angry insects, their numbers so great that they showed up on sensors as solid masses. "Begin the attack," Zalvek commanded, his voice carrying across the communication channels to every ship in the Armada. "Show these primitives what happens when they defy the hegemony." The first wave of the assault was devastating. Weapons that had shattered the defenses of countless worlds opened fire simultaneously, creating a light show that was visible from multiple star systems. Energy beams that could melt continents, missiles that could level mountain ranges, and particle cannons that could punch through any known shield technology. But something strange happened as the attack reached its target area. The human ships didn't try to meet the assault head-on like every other species had done. Instead, they seemed to dance between the incoming fire, their movements so perfectly coordinated that they appeared to be following some invisible choreography. The human vessels were smaller and fewer in number, but they moved with impossible precision. They slipped through gaps in the hegemony formation that shouldn't have existed, exploiting weaknesses and attack patterns that had never failed before. It was as if they knew exactly where every shot would be fired before the hegemony. Gunners even pulled their triggers. Then something truly impossible began to happen. Ships within the Grand Armada started behaving strangely. A massive dreadnought suddenly swung its main guns toward its own escort vessels instead of targeting the humans. Fighter squadrons broke formation and began flying in random directions, their pilots frantically trying to regain control of their craft. "What is happening?" Zalvek demanded from his command throne, watching in horror as chaos spread through his previously perfect formation. His tactical officer was staring at his displays in complete bewilderment. "Sir, our ships are not responding to commands properly. Weapon systems are targeting friendly vessels, navigation computers are providing false coordinates, and communication arrays are broadcasting conflicting orders." The situation rapidly deteriorated as more and more ships fell victim to the mysterious malfunction. Massive vessels that had conquered star systems found themselves unable to control their own weapon systems. Fighter pilots discovered that their targeting computers were locking onto Allied ships instead of human vessels. A new voice suddenly cut through the chaos on Zalvek's command bridge. It was a human woman speaking perfect hegemony standard language with absolute confidence. "Supreme Commander Zalvek, this is Captain Colonel Yu Jinna of Earth Defense. Command, I hope you're beginning to understand that your tactics are as outdated as your technology." Zalvek's mandibles clicked furiously as he tried to process what was happening to his invincible armada. "How are you doing this? How are you controlling our ships?" Captain Colonel Yu's response carried a tone of patient explanation, as if she were teaching a child. "Commander, every piece of technology your empire uses was originally developed by the species you conquered. The Alterans created your shield generators, the Zorithians designed your weapon systems, the Kellans developed your navigation computers. You just stole their work and slapped hegemony labels on it." The truth hit Zalvek like a physical blow. "You studied the original specifications." "We had decades to examine every system your empire uses," Yu continued. "While you were busy conquering worlds, we were reverse engineering every piece of technology you had stolen from others. We know your systems better than you do because we studied them from the ground up, not just the surface modifications your engineers made." Around them, the Grand Armada continued to fall apart as human infiltration programs spread through the fleet's computer networks. Ships that had never known defeat found themselves completely helpless, their own technology turned against them by an enemy that understood it better than they did. Within 6 hours, 10,000 ships that represented the combined might of 12,000 conquered worlds hung powerless in space, not destroyed, but completely neutralized. The Grand Armada had become the largest collection of floating scrap metal in galactic history. Supreme Commander Zalvek stared at his tactical display in stunned silence, watching as his empire's greatest weapon became its greatest embarrassment. Supreme. Commander Zalvek sat in his command chair, staring at the tactical display that showed his entire Grand Armada floating helplessly in space. 10,000 ships, the pride of the hegemony military, had been reduced to expensive scrap metal in less than 6 hours. His hands trembled as he tried to process the magnitude of the defeat. Around him, his bridge crew worked frantically to restore basic ship functions, but every system they tried to reactivate was immediately shut down by human computer viruses. Even the life support systems were only working because the humans were allowing them to function. They were completely at the mercy of a species they had dismissed as primitive just days earlier. The main communication screen suddenly activated, displaying the calm face of Admiral Kim Dae-ho. Behind him, Zalvek could see human officers working at stations that looked far more advanced than anything the hegemony possessed. The irony was not lost on him that these supposedly backward aliens had technology that made his empire's equipment look ancient. "Supreme Commander Zalvek," Admiral Kim began, his voice carrying across not just to the disabled flagship, but to every ship in the Armada. "Your forces are completely neutralized, but this is not the end of our conversation. In fact, the real lesson is just beginning." Kim gestured to someone off-screen, and suddenly the communication expanded to include thousands of additional channels. Zalvek realized with growing horror that the humans were broadcasting to every world in the hegemony simultaneously, reaching all 12,000 conquered planets at once. "To every subjugated species within the hegemony," Kim continued, his words being translated into hundreds of different languages in real time. "You are no longer alone. For too long you have suffered under the boot of oppression, told that resistance was impossible, that the hegemony was too powerful to defeat. Today we prove that was a lie. On worlds across the galaxy, beings who had given up hope of freedom suddenly stopped their daily routines to listen to the impossible broadcast. Alterans working in forced labor camps looked up from their tasks. Zorithian warriors imprisoned for refusing to serve the hegemony pressed their faces against cell bars. Kellan scientists forced to develop weapons for their oppressors put down their tools. Captain Lee Minji appeared on screen next to Admiral Kim, holding a datapad that glowed with complex information. "My technical team has spent months preparing something special for all of you. We are transmitting complete technological specifications, tactical analyses, and detailed breakdowns of every hegemony weakness we have discovered." The data packages began flooding communication networks across the galaxy. Every conquered world received the same arsenal of knowledge that Earth had used to defeat the supposedly invincible Empire. Detailed schematics showing how hegemony ships could be disabled, tactical manuals explaining their predictable attack patterns, and step-by-step instructions for turning their own technology against them. "We offer you what we were given," Kim explained as the massive data transfer continued. "Time to prepare, knowledge to succeed, and the tools to reclaim your freedom. The hegemony conquered you because you faced them alone, without knowing their weaknesses. Now you have everything you need to fight back." Colonel Yu Jinna was monitoring communication networks from Earth's command center, watching as world after world began downloading and implementing the human strategies. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Planets that had been passive for centuries suddenly erupted with coordinated resistance movements. The Kellans were the first to act. These master engineers had been subjugated for over 2 centuries, forced to maintain hegemony equipment and infrastructure. Using the detailed technical specifications provided by the humans, they began systematically sabotaging every piece of hegemony technology on their world. Within days, the entire garrison fleet found their ships unable to leave orbit. The Alterans, who had surrendered without a fight when first contacted by the hegemony, discovered that their homeworld possessed natural defensive advantages they had never realized. The human tactical analysis showed them how to use their planet's magnetic field to disrupt hegemony sensors, and how their crystalline formations could be weaponized against orbital bombardment. Across the galaxy, the pattern repeated itself. The Zorithians used their warrior traditions combined with human strategy to overwhelm their occupying forces. The Viridians turned their diplomatic skills toward organizing multi-system rebellions. Even species that had been conquered so long ago they had forgotten their original names began rising up with newfound hope. The hegemony's response was predictably brutal at first. They attempted to crush the rebellions using their standard, overwhelming force tactics, but every world they attacked now knew exactly how to counter those tactics. Fleets that had conquered star systems found themselves outmaneuvered by supposedly primitive rebels who fought with impossible coordination and knowledge. Supreme. Commander Zalvek watched in stunned silence as reports poured in from across his crumbling empire. World after world was throwing off hegemony control, using human-provided knowledge to turn their oppressors' own weapons against them. The carefully constructed empire that had taken millennia to build was falling apart in a matter of weeks. "This is impossible," he whispered, staring at the tactical displays showing red warning symbols across thousands of star systems. "How can primitives defeat the greatest military force in galactic history?" Colonel Yu's voice answered him from the communication system, having apparently overheard his desperate question. "Commander, you keep calling us primitive, but you're missing the point entirely. We're not primitive, we're students, and we just had the best teacher in the galaxy showing us exactly how your empire works." Within 3 months, the hegemony had effectively ceased to exist. The 12,000 worlds that had once paid tribute to the empire were now independent, many of them forming new alliances based on mutual defense rather than conquest. The galaxy's political map had been completely redrawn, not through war and conquest, but through education and shared knowledge. Zalvek's final transmission to Earth was sent from a small escape pod, his flagship having been peacefully occupied, by former hegemony slaves who now controlled it better than he ever had. His voice was broken, desperate, barely recognizable as the confident commander who had once struck fear into entire civilizations. "Please," he begged, his words transmitted across space to the humans who had destroyed everything he had ever believed in. "We surrender. We admit defeat. Show mercy to what remains of our people." Admiral Kim's response came quickly, delivered with the same calm precision that had characterized humanity's very first reply to the hegemony's ultimatum. "So many months earlier, we gave you our warning, Commander. You chose not to listen. The lesson is over, class dismissed. The age of the hegemony ended not with the rise of a new empire, but with the galaxy's first lesson in why humans made terrible students, but exceptional teachers. They had turned the oppressor's greatest strength into their ultimate weakness, proving that knowledge truly was the most powerful weapon in the universe.